I would like to begin by acknowledging that we gather today in Port Townsend on the ancestral homelands of the Sklallam, Suquamish, Makah, Chimicum, and Tawana-Skokomish nations, as well as nations who met and traded in this area. Native peoples have cared for these lands from time immemorial and continue to do so today. Please join me in expressing our deepest respect and gratitude. Welcome to the Artist Talk for Some Mornings, paintings by Meg Kaczyk from poems by Linda M. Robertson, currently showing at Grover Gallery through May 30th, 2022. My name is Kathleen Garrett. I'm the exhibits director at Northwind Art, and it's my pleasure to say hello to all of you tonight, including Meg Kaczyk and Linda Robertson, who I'll be introducing shortly. We will run a short video walkthrough of the exhibit. Meg will give her presentation, and then Linda will talk about her ekphrastic process, after which we will open the floor to questions. So I'm going to share my screen and bring up the video. As I introduce Meg and Linda. Meg Kaczyk began her creative career as an illustrator and designer in the Midwest, graduating from Kendall School of Design and working in print and publication in Grand Rapids and Detroit. Seeking arts community in the 80s, she moved west to Portland, Oregon, then to Port Townsend in 2016. Over the years, her painting life played counterpoint to her corporate creative director role, emboldening the loose and fluid style of her work today. Meg teaches creative process classes at Northwind Art School and exhibits her work throughout the region. Meg is also Northwind Art's strategy and education director. Her paintings carry the legacy of abstract expressionism forward, informed by her Buddhist practice, the natural world, and life's losses, consciously uncovering personal yet universal themes of grief, gratitude, and presence. Linda M. Robertson has lived in Washington State for over 30 years after living in San Diego, Santa Barbara, Squaw Valley, and north of the Golden Gate Bridge. She earned an MFA from Chatham University, Pittsburgh. Her writing is infused with a deep sense of place and love of the natural world. In 2014, the Methow Conservancy published her poems, Letters to Julia, 1898 to 1899, The Methow Valley, in a fine press book. She's currently completing a full-length manuscript, The Missing. Recent work considers the loss of her 20-year-old son, Evan, in the mountains of British Columbia, and her oldest brother, Tommy, to brain disease. Aging parents, her years living in the North Cascades and on the shores of the Salish Sea. Thank you, Meg and Linda, for being here tonight. I know many in our audience are very interested in learning more about your work in paint and words and the ideas behind your collaboration. So now I will stop sharing the screen so that Meg can share. Take it away, Meg.
All righty. And as if by magic, I think it worked. Thank you very much, Kathleen, and thank you, Linda. Such gratitude for what we worked on together. A little bit about just kind of an overview. The work I've been saying it's been over a year in the making, but it's actually October 2020. I think we ran into each other on the beach in September, and I was teaching my first online course at that time. So it comes from, it's a pretty big shift for me, and it comes from a synergy of circumstance, community. I became really aware of how important community is to art making, painting itself, the process of paintings, and of course the words. So it was a real synergy, a real confluence of these influences. My real deep desire that I have from this work is that when people can take in the paintings and the poems together, there's a third thing that happens. That is very personal for me. I approached it very personally, but that there's a universal aspect, and that's really my deepest desire for this work. But looking back for a moment, if anybody has followed my work, you might think that this current work is a bit of a departure. These pieces that I'm kind of flipping through now is the work that's from about 2003 to 2020. And although abstract, it certainly is different. But that was latex enamel, and this new work is oils, oil bar and oil paint from tubes. Oils are not new to my practice. Back in 1999, from 1999 to 2002, I did the same kind of approach. I worked in oil bars on Reeves BFK paper, which is the same thing that I'm doing now. The work might look slightly different. I did pomegranates and figurative work, different bodies of work, different series. Of pomegranate series was the first series in '99, and I moved on to some figurative work and adolescent series. My children will recognize themselves in these pieces. And so you can see those early influences, perhaps the gestural approach or some of the energy of the lines. So, but I approached it at that time quite, you could see my illustration background, I will say, more like drawing with paint. That was kind of that body of work. And then in 2003, I turned to latex enamel. And for the next 18 years, I worked in that medium, first starting small and then bigger, lots of different themes, florals, a series I called Urban Landscape. Always abstract, but in this latex enamel style, eventually getting quite large. And then when I moved to Port Townsend, I really turned to the place, the sense of place around me. And that was landscape and a nod to the richness of harvest and agriculture. And then I just kept working at that way. I exhibited at Northwind Art Showcase and Gallery 9, and that was sort of my path. And then life happened. First COVID, right? And like everyone else, we pivoted quickly to online. And one of the things that happened out of that experience was coming together with a group of artists, and we offered each other support and conversation, and it kind of evolved into a real deepening. And through that community of artists, who I'll showcase now, Sally Warren, Michelle Hagawood, Shirley Shire, Dana Weir, Rufina Garay, Helga Winter. These women really, this is when I talk about community being so important in my art making. It was such support, and they really taught me to dive deep. So my tendency as an illustrator was to, and you can see the energy in my work, I suppose, go deep, go fast, a sense of motion and just kind of going straight for it. And these women, many of them spend sometimes months on exploring, following their thread, listening to their voice, trying things out. And they really encouraged me to approach that way. So that's really fed this work. Deep time exploring the medium. I originally was going to do oils and latex enamel as I explored the poems, but I really kind of followed the thread of the oil. So I'm very grateful for that community of support. It makes me understand how important it is for all of us. COVID also had me teaching online for the first time. So the very first, working for Northwind Art School, we had to pivot and say, okay, so I was scheduled to teach an in-person class called Paint from Poems, which I've been teaching for a long time, but I hadn't been working in that way. I taught it as a way to get inspiration, to jumpstart your own work. And so I'd been teaching this class, and we decided, well, let's try it online. And so I was preparing, and it was my very first one. And so I took a walk on the beach prior, and that's when I ran into Linda. Now, Linda and I knew each other. First of all, we first met in a walking group. A shout out to Kay and Carl for a walking group for a lot of new folks that to Port Townsend. It helped us kind of get to know people, but also get to know the town. We would explore different trails. We'd walk for an hour every Tuesday morning. And during one of those walks, Linda recited for me her a fragment of her Letters to Julia poem. And I fell in love with it. It was just magical. And so I knew I loved her writing. And I don't know if it was maybe like a year later or something. I can't remember the timing, but there was a group of folks that we all got together on a community of artists called Roadstead Project. And it was visual artists and writers getting together to collaborate quite intentionally. Ekphrastic, what I call reverse ekphrastic. And I wasn't, however, in Linda's group. We kind of broke off into smaller groups. I was in a group with Letitia Huber, and who else was in my group? I can't remember. But anyway, Sheila Bender, Jim Murphy, Sarah Zale, a bunch of Pam Dion, a bunch of really great local writers. And I think we pursued that for a while, and I think some of them kept going, and life took over, and I dropped out for a while. But it was, again, just kind of shows you how important community was, and sort of this kind of collaboration was not completely a new thing. Anyway, back to the meeting on the beach. So we kind of were familiar already with collaborating with visual art and poetry, and I ran into her on the beach, and again, she just recited a poem for me, and I was like, wow, that's great. Will you send it to me and I'll use it in class? Because I found that working side by side with my students in that online experience kind of worked better. So I did a piece. It was of a polar bear. I still have it somewhere. And that just got me thinking. And I asked her for more poems, and then I asked her for more poems, and then I asked for more. And that was that's kind of how it got started, and it just went from there. I would be remiss in talking about these influences that kind of have come together to influence the work that you see in some mornings, and that is the influence of abstract expressionists and abstract painters, particularly the women, but not all women. Joan Mitchell worked a lot with poets and poetry, which I found out sort of after I'd already been starting to work in this way, and it was a bit of a revelation. Lee Krasner, Elizabeth Murray, and Lucinda Parker. Another piece of this confluence of influences in my life is my Buddhist practice. And Buddhism really teaches the beauty and the preciousness of transience and presence, which poetry does too. And that kind of brings us there. And so I think that's why poetry attracts me, and why Buddhism attracts me, and that sense of presence and the felt experience. And finally, in going through these confluences, another influence in my evolution and in this work was the illness of my husband. Joe was really sick at the time, about a year ago. We almost lost him, and it was hard to deal with that grief and loss. As much as you can accept that there's transience, there's still great loss. And Linda's poems capture those moments beautifully. And so I found it really, really helpful to go into my studio with those poems and work. I found great solace there. And I guess it's no surprise to the world that art making helps. It just helps. But in particular, working with the poems was really something that kind of saved me. It was really great. And out of that, I think all those influences came this big shift in my work to where it is today. And who knows where it's going to go. But I'm grateful for the opportunity to go slow, to sit with the words, to sit in silence and meditation that my practice gives me, and to be inspired by other artists, both in my community and at large. So the legacy of artists before me. So with that, I would like to turn to a little bit about the process, because if any of you are like me, I love process. I'd love to learn all about process. So how I worked, and I will again give kudos to my fellow, my Artist Connect group for encouraging me, inspiring me in working in this way. So what I would do is I would print out the poems, and then I would chop up pieces of the many, many sketches I have, lots of plein air sketches, watercolor, and I would tape them to the poems, not necessarily like definitively often, and many of them there, I have all the files over here. There's a number of little snippets. But the important thing to note, and what I felt really strongly about, was that these were not illustrations. These were evocations. These were evolutions of where Linda's words took me. I was trained as an illustrator, and I just knew that that wasn't where I wanted to take it. I wanted to take it as an expression. So I would write my own words on the poems, and I would write colors, words, what it came up for me, and that would help guide the little snippets that I would chop up and put next to it. I would use that, and that was my starting point. As I mentioned earlier, I originally was thinking, as I kind of explored this, that I would do like the oil painting and the acrylic enamel. I couldn't believe I was like moving away from acrylic enamel for this work, but it just is not where it went. And I was really stopping and listening to the thread and where it went. There's a couple of pieces that have come out of it that are that way, and I never will rule anything out. But as I followed that thread and listened to where the work was going, I moved deeper into the oils. These are some of the early studies that I did in exploring this direction before it kind of took shape into the final form. Hadn't really thought about how the poems would be presented or anything in that way. Unlike that old work where I did oils on the Reeves BFK, I started scribing and playing with that. But I don't use any mediums aside from Gamsol for those geeky oil painters in the audience. I had in October of 21, I had a residency at Playa at Summer Lake. Recommend it to anyone for any kind of art form. And I started experimenting with I couldn't bring the oils with me because we were in a camper van and oils take forever to dry. And so I brought my watercolors, but I decided to start exploring with graphite and charcoal. And it just sent me. It was really lovely. So when I came back, some of the later pieces in the exhibit integrate some graphite and charcoal in them as well. That the painting in the back, actually, it's behind me here as well, what the 6-foot by 8-foot piece is. And in fact, it's the only piece in the exhibit that's not based on a poem, but it's based on a holy place. This piece, you can see some integration of the graphite and the charcoal in as well. This piece is called Crossings. And if you've been to this exhibit, you'll see it's kind of a large piece, and the poem is not mounted next to it because of the scale. But if you're curious, it's in the exhibit catalog, and it's also at the front desk in the book there that the person can show you if you want to read the poem with it. Or I'm sure Linda would send it to you if you needed it. I'd like to just comment about not every piece in the exhibit, but just maybe a couple of pieces to give you just a little context about them. This piece is called After 10 Days Away. And, it's funny, in working on this body of work that came out of a sense of loss and grief, I sometimes think, boy, people think they're going to walk in and see gloom and doom, and but to me, there's this beauty and this beautiful tenderness that comes out of that kind of transience. And this piece is really joyful. I think it's called After 10 Days Away, and to me, it's the joy of returning. So there's nothing like gratitude when things just kind of get a little better. And I will say that Joe is doing well now. He is on a trial drug, and while he's not cured, it sure is better than it was a year ago. And so we're very grateful, and that's that sense of returning and gratitude. This piece is called To a Cloud, and I guess you could say Linda was a little bit of my therapist in this one, because I lost a friend in the last year and to cancer, and she spent time in the infusion ward with Joe, and when we lost her, I was just where do I put this? I wasn't her best friend, but we all feel lost when we lose someone, So I said, Linda, you have some more poems? Send me some stuff. And she kindly sent me more. And I guess she's told me since then, this is a newer poem. It was written in 2020. It captured my friend like phenomenally, amazingly. And it was so helpful for me to work on it. And though I will say I worked on it and overworked it and had to start over and start at. So this is one I painted twice. But it just really meant something to me, this piece. And it provided solace for sure. This piece, as I said, is the only piece in the exhibit that is not about not from a poem, although it's funny because the way we hung the show to the right of it is the poem Illumination, and someone asked me if they go together, and they could, they could, and I think that they could because this was painted from a sketch that I did, from this sketch behind me that I did during my residency at Playa, that I would go up in the afternoons. In the mornings, I'd sketch on the playa. And then behind me was a ridge that we could get to. And I would walk up on the ridge and sketch up there. And there was this one little piece of the rock that reminded me, and perhaps it was my imagination, but it reminded me so much of the White Place, Plaza Blanca in New Mexico, Georgia O'Keeffe territory, magical place where I have been and have sketched. And I just focused on it and said, this is a magical place. And I was in a magical time being on the residency. So this piece came from that. So it's kind of holy ground and sacred ground. And the poem Illumination kind of speaks to that a little bit. And it's the biggest piece in the show, which was really fun. Shout out to Lucy, Joe, and Jacob for helping me mount it on a 6-foot panel. So that's just a little bit of the show, flipping through a few more if folks haven't seen them. And then I'd love to turn to Linda now and ask her, first of all, how was this for you? And then talk a little bit about, I know you're not new to ekphrastic, far from it, and maybe a little bit of your history with that. And yeah. Stop share.
I was muted. I have to read a poem because Meg was showing the one that with a lot of the orange and the energy, and it's called After 10 Days Away. And I'm just going to share that poem with you so you can kind of see her response to these words. After 10 days away, return to a world roused, so much desire in the wind. Meadowlarks betray our yearning. Small birds gift mullion with deepest sky, wear rivers on their wings. This morning, I believe nothing has been lost. Blossoms on serviceberry shrubs thread mountain light down nearby swales. One red-tailed hawk, a compass above us. There is no going without returning. So, just wanted to share one poem at least. This was just such a wonderful, joyful experience for me. I mean, first to get to know Meg better and to have my work, her asking me for more poems, and I didn't know anything about what was going on, and I went over and saw some of the first work and just was so happy, just felt so happy. And to see this show up is it's such a joy for me. I've always loved art and visual art, but I've never been a visual artist myself. And but I have visual artists in my family, and they've taught me a lot. And when I went back, I'm kind of a late bloomer. I got my MFA when I was 50. I started the class when I was 56 years old. And I was in a big shift in my life, and my daughter was living in London at the time. And I went and I stayed in London several times for long periods of time, for months. And I decided to do an independent project on ekphrastic writing, which is writing poems to visual art. And that was such a wonderful way for me to really change all themes of my work. I wasn't always writing about the Methow Valley where I lived for 26 years. It just really widened my worlds and enriched my life in so many ways. But anyway, I did an independent project called Gaze, G-A-Z-E, and that includes poems written about, paintings from 1520, the pre-Raphaelite exhibit that I saw at the National Gallery. There were Matisse cutouts at the Tate, very contemporary work from the Turner Prize. It was really a great experience for me, and that I just got hooked on it. So it really, I really like writing about art. So it's such a satisfying thing to see someone respond to my work with visual art. And there's a wonderful quote that I put in this paper from my independent project by this poet and critic, John Hollander. And he talks about the idea of a poet in ekphrastic work entering the work of art, which encourages us to make the spirit and the space of the work of art our own. And I feel like Meg has just done that so beautifully. And anyway, and so then also, I'm always looking for kind of opportunities in my own writing, just ways to enlarge my writing life. And Paul Nelson in Seattle has a wonderful poetry postcard in August every year. And I have done that 3 years in a row, where you send a postcard with a poem on it every day for the month of August to different people. And those postcards go all over the world. And actually, several of the poems that Meg chose to respond to are poems that came from that postcard project. And then the cloud poem I wrote just kind of in the middle of this last year. So that's a very recent poem. And one of the interesting things I think that helped me keep my writing fresh and just growing a lot is, after seeing what Meg was doing, I'd been doing these things where I was writing to just one, a lot of different pieces, right, by various artists and photographers. But during COVID, I didn't have really the writing group. I'm so jealous of Meg with that group of support, because I really didn't have much of that. And I felt pretty alone and working by myself a lot, which is okay. I'm kind of used to that. But I decided to ask my mother-in-law, Kayan, who is here tonight, who's an artist. And I asked her if she would send me some of her art to kind of give me some inspiration, and kind of thinking about, well, maybe I'll write it. I'll see what I can do with some of these. So they're very abstract pieces. And I've written 15 short poems so far to those pieces. And I'm hoping to get back to that and continue with that project and working with Kayan's wonderful work. So just another note is that the poems that are in the show and in the book, some of those poems are 20 years old, a few of them, and then they just span all the way up to very, very recent. So.
Yeah, something that that I was just thinking about was that there is some curation involved, like what you chose. I mean, I'm sure you could have sent me anything and you chose, and so it wasn't a collaboration in the sense of you told me what to do or anything like that. There was this wonderful generosity, but there was curation involved. I mean, you chose to send me. You said intentionally some short ones in some extent. Yeah.
For definitely, I think most of the ones I sent you were fairly short. I don't know, for some reason that just felt like that was probably better. I don't know, just felt right.
And I will tell the poets in the audience that she was very kind when I came to typesetting them, both in the book and I guess on the boards. I said, Linda, what about the line breaks? I think this might mess up. She was, oh, I'll change the line breaks. Don't worry. So that was a collaboration. I don't think every poet would be willing to change line breaks.
It wasn't every poem either. So there were just a few. It was okay. Yeah, it was okay. Yeah. Well, I also remember, I think when I was first kind of looking through my poems, because I have a lot of poems. I have like well over 100 for sure, and I was kind of looking through them thinking about you kind of using them for painting too. And I guess I kind of maybe thought about a little bit of a story, that there might be a story, because I'm Mexican, Scot, and Irish. I love a good story, right? And that's those letters to Julia poems that I've written are a real story. Right. And I like the idea of kind of storytelling. And where you took my work, it's just so wonderful, because your work has a real story in it,
I will say that Linda was very, when we put together the book, the exhibit book, you were pretty pivotal in that, because I had one idea of the way it was going to go, and we met and we spread it all out, and I just let her be completely in charge of the order of the poems. So there's that story. That's what made me think of it. That's the storytelling piece of it. You were like, oh no, this one is definitely first. This one is definitely, and it went through that, which was interesting. Although when people come into the gallery and they ask me, do we start somewhere? And I say no. I mean, it was more just how it hung together that it went. Yeah. Would you agree? Would you agree that there's not, it was one thing in the book, but yeah.
Yeah. I totally agree. Yeah. Let's see what I was going to say. Yeah, I was really interested. I was interested to find out which poems you would choose.
Yeah.
We didn't ever think, I mean, I wasn't thinking about like having a show, or it was going to be, I didn't know if you'd paint to 2 poems, or, you know, I mean, that you painted 16. I had no idea. We had no idea of that.
And I still have a stack here. There's ones where I go, oh, I should. So I can't wait to get back in the studio. I don't know what's going to happen next on it.
Right. Yeah.
I really don't know.
Yeah.
Can't wait to get back to the studio. I know that's what's happening next.
Yeah.
Kathleen, do you think we should open it up to questions?
Absolutely. If folks want to turn on their video and or audio, definitely audio, raise your hand or put it in the chat. We can read the questions, or we can see you and ask away.
I did see one question that was posed, and it was asked about the titles of the paintings, and they are the titles of the poems. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, why don't I start? How has this collaboration changed, confirmed, or challenged the way each of you works creatively?
I guess I'll go first with that. I guess the biggest, it changed the way the work, because even though I was teaching that method, I wasn't actually doing that method myself. And I think it was, different. I chose the way of feeling my way through universal feelings, through personal and universal feelings. Really the tapping into that rather, consciously, rather than illustration, or, I mean, there's many ways I teach it: narrative, object-based typography. There's many ways to approach the poems, but so that was very conscious, and never a question that it would be any other way, that is the way I would work. I think the biggest question for me, it was so freeing. It's such a great way to touch into something to start. The biggest question is, will I continue working this way? I don't know. I don't think I'm done, but it might change future work when I'm not working from poems. I wouldn't say I would always work from poems. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes. It was a pivot for sure for me.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a different question, because I had already done the work, right, and then given that to Meg. But I have to say, the idea of looking at one person's body of work by one person, which I'm now doing with Kayan's work, I'd never done that before. So really, I did a little bit of it with the photography exhibit, but it wasn't anything like what I've really been doing with Kayan's work. So that's new for me, and it just reminds me. I mean, Meg's really inspires me, and it just reminds me to keep open to possibilities, and to I do work because I'm alone a lot, and always looking for ways to grow my writing. I do workshops through the Poetry School of London online, and most of them are not Zoom. They're just kind of reading and posting work. But I've written a lot of poems this last year of doing that, and my work is changing. It's changing, and I'm really enjoying that. Really pushing myself into new kind of themes and realms and forms, and I don't know. I mean, it's all part of this journey of being a writer, and I'm so love it. I love my journey.
Well, that's wonderful, and I have to say that in the chat, people are saying, read another poem, please.
Oh,
so if you would, maybe that's our next seg. And then I see Jan Sprague's hand is up.
Hey, Linda, tell me which poem you're going to read, and I'll see if I have the image available. I don't know if I will. Well, it'll have to be quick change, but let me see.
You have August Meteors.
I think I can have it. Let me see.
And while you're looking, we have another question in the chat that says, what are the approximate sizes of most of the paintings? And I was really struck by the smallest one is what, 6 by 6, Meg? And then the biggest one is 6 feet wide. So they really, really vary in size from
Yeah,
small
the
to large.
smallest one was my excuse me while I'm looking at the same time, was the test. Like it was like, how am I going to mount these and present them? Because I wanted the poem. I don't know, again, those of you who are poets or know what a broadside is. I've always loved broadsides. And so I was like, how can I honor the poem, typeset it, honor it as art next to the piece without overpowering the piece. So that was my little test, was the 6x6. It's like, could this work? Could I typeset it? Could I? And it did work. And then it went on from there. And that's why with the bigger ones, I don't do the broadside, because it would just be too huge. It wouldn't work. But yeah.
Meg, how about, I just realized that August Meteors isn't in the book, so I don't have
Oh.
How about Against Leaving?
Okay,
Did you
that
have
one
that
we have, yes.
Okay. That's another one of my favorite. I love this. Like this.
Oh, let me find. Well, you start reading and I'll look for it. I don't want to delay.
So I wrote this poem as I was leaving, after living in the Methow Valley on a piece of property for 26 years. And anyway, it's called Against Leaving. Later I will say the hills conspired. Crowds of balsam root and lupin hindered my passage, my shoulders bound by snowthrift clouds. Not one clock struck the hour. I leaned toward the broadest yellow pine, the flags of prayer, where male grouse stood sentry. The maple tree sheltered the bird bull's sheen. A last offering, the distances before me, inscribed with raven wings. Yeah.
This was one of those really satisfying moments when Linda saw this piece in the studio and she just stood there and said, oh my God, it totally says it. It made me happy.
Yeah.
What size is this piece, Meg?
That one is 16 by 24, I believe, 18 by 24.
It's lovely.
18 by 24. I'm looking in the book.
Oh, there we go. Oh, hey, good memory. I guess I know the pieces, huh?
For anybody that is going to be around, I am going to do a poetry reading at the gallery on Saturday, the 2nd at 3 o'clock. So.
Oops, Kathleen, you're muted.
Oh, Kathleen, you're muted. Yeah.
Hi, Jan. What's your question?
Mine is about not against leaving, but in my country. And I've also got the book here some mornings. And this particular, a lot of times since I've taken Meg's class, both on abstraction and in her poetry class, I understand what she's doing and I can feel it. But this one in my country, to be honest, I just don't get it. So I was wondering, and I think it would be lovely that if you could read it, and maybe you said that you started, Meg, with some snippets, sort of a path for me to go into this painting.
Yeah, I'm just going to see if I have my. So here's my little worksheet, my sketchy worksheet. And this sketch actually I did plein air itself, so it wasn't a snippet of something, it's whole itself while on my residency. So it's basically based on I think it's based on a bigger piece. And the words I wrote for myself were circled, embraced, presence, birds, breath. What color is the dead? Mossy green, cerulean blue, peace, quiet. So, it's not illustration. I mean, I want to be really clear. It comes from a felt sense, and we
Yes.
sometimes approach that through color, and sometimes through just energetic line or not. Yeah. So I don't know. Not every piece of artwork has to make sense right away.
Well, true, but since I actually work at the gallery,
You're
it's
staring at that one all the time. Right?
I'm
Now
not
think
not
about
only that, but I would like to, if anybody asked me to have a way into it, at least I could. So that was very helpful.
it. Mhm, mhm.
So shall I read the poem?
That would be lovely.
Okay, so this is called In My Country. In my country, the dead return. Hawk-headed guardians settle close so I might know their careful watching, their pure breath. In my country, the dead return on blue winds at dawn, to snow-laden perches, to the broad boulder in the field, to the blossoming apple tree in the orchard, to the charred top of the twice-struck pine. As the day dims, they leave me. They do not travel far. They will never be far.
Thank you both. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. We do have another question in the chat from Kay. What was the best part of your collaboration?
Getting to know Linda better a little bit. It was juicy. I would just like it. For me, again, it has been a real shift for my work, and I think without all those separate influences, especially Linda's poems and the generosity of that. And she did it. I would say that the best part of it is she didn't get in my way. You know, I don't know that that would be true of any writer, you know, that they could only like want to, you know, like she accepted it. She loved it and she accepted it and just let me be. And wow, that's pretty remarkable.
And I feel the same way about getting, I mean, this has brought Meg and I feel like we're kin now, right? You just are forever. And such a lovely thing. And just, I feel very affirmed. I don't share my work that much. I don't publish much and all that. And it's just such a wonderful thing to have somebody believe in my work and respond and create such beauty paired with my work. It's just, as I said in one of the introduction or whatever, I feel like your work really sings the songs of my work, and we just really respect each other. And that was really important. You know, that's really important.
And I will add that I feel like the work is successful because we made people cry, which sounds terrible, but you know, it's only been open less than a week, and you know, there was an artist meet and greet and whatnot. So I've had a chance to observe people experiencing the work, and you really need it. The best way to experience this is go in more than once and go in and be with the work. That was my vision. That's why the Grover, because it's so intimate and lovely. And you know, eventually I would love it to be in a hospital or a church or some place where people could use some solace from the words. Anyway, that has meant a lot to me. I feel like it was successful because people walk into it and they get it, that what has happened there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we have a question in the chat. Would it be too hard to go through and show the paintings once again? Shall I show the video while we get a question from Glow? It looks like Glow is next. Would that be okay?
Yeah, or I can see, let me do a better job of trying to find them, because then I could do them still.
Okay.
If I can.
And Glow, what's your question, Glow?
My question is, my husband Tom couldn't be here tonight, but he wanted to ask Meg, or want me to ask Meg, if could you imagine doing these in acrylic, or would they have worked? Why did you choose oil? I think he's working with acrylic, so I think he's getting itchy fingers from them.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I did find the poem, so I'll be able to share. They didn't work in acrylic, well, it didn't work. It wasn't working for me. The oils were so juicy and so malleable and so, maybe it was just, I was ready for oils, but like I said, I started by doing acrylics, and that here, right here is, one of the August meteors in acrylic. And it just, I've been painting acrylics for 18 years and it wasn't working. That's why I just kind of don't know where it's going, because we'll see. I think because I didn't get the controlled line work maybe and the layering that I just really wanted.
It
So,
seems like having those oil crayons or oil, what do you call them?
the oil bars. Mhm.
Yeah, that would be something too.
Yes, I really like that. Although this time I also used paint from a tube and palette knife, and then I went into graphite, and so I'm really excited to kind of see where I decide to go with it. I don't know. It'll be
Great,
fun. I'm not done. I can't wait to get back to the studio.
great, thanks.
So I did find my folder that had all the final images. So I can share. And I think it did it in 2 folders, but I think I can do this so it is full screen. There's that against leaving again.
Meg, we've got a couple questions. Do you use a blender stick with the oil sticks?
No,
Okay, and the next question is, once you decided to do this project, did you feel more pressure than when you are painting alone?
oh, what a great question. No, and if you cast your not at all, and if you cast your mind back on some of those other influences I mentioned, my husband being really ill, like those poems really gave me comfort, and my studio gave me comfort. So it was not pressure at all. It really was release. Yeah. And I wasn't, and I'll go back to my Artist Connect group as well. They said, go slow. Don't be thinking of a show already. Don't be, find out where it goes. So I did not embark on this saying, I'm going to have a show. I was like, let's see where the work goes. It could have just fizzled or been a distinct project. And then I went back to my latex enamel, but that's not what happened.
Personal thing.
Mhm. Here's August meteors.
Mhm.
And that one is square 16 by 16. This one's blessings for the new year. One of the early pieces in the body of work.
And what size is that one?
That one is, I'm going to say it was 16 by 20.
Mhm.
Crossings is large. It's 30 by 40 or 28 by 24, something like that. This piece is not in the exhibit because it's sold prior. The poem it's called Illumination. And it's in the book though, so that's nice. There's Crossings.
No,
That one's for Jan.
in my country.
In my country, sorry. And this is the title piece of the show, Some Morning. And I kind of, to me, the title Some Mornings and the poem itself, which is a lovely poem, really is about sometimes it's just like that, the way things are, the way things is. This is
The last of June.
The last of June. I was going to say the 10 days of June. I was mixing my titles up. Yes, this is another kind of joyful one, spring-like joyful to me.
And what size is this?
That one is also 16 by 20, I believe. Linda can, like, she can proof check me on in the book. We have the sizes in the book. It might be smaller, actually. I think it was on smaller. 12 by
Related,
16.
related question, Meg, how did you choose the size for each painting?
Oh, that's such a good question. Gut. But I will say that I had to map out ahead of time what size I wanted it to be and what size the poem would be. That had to be planned before I decided for sure on the size. So that it's funny. Anybody who's an artist knows that you actually have to think about the frame before you start the painting, because that you will need to finish it, and so yes, I did think about the sizes beforehand, but it was by gut. It was what felt right. And then, as many painters do, it's a wonderful itch to scratch to go big. Going big is really fun. Although my husband warns me I can't go any bigger than 6 by 3 feet by 6, because that will fit exactly in the back of our pickup truck. That's it.
And it looks like, Jan, you might have a follow-up question?
I do. And it's also related to all the people asking about size. Over to the right, I think they're called sketches, Meg.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of in the shop area. Now, were those your pre-sketches to your big works, or are those, how are they connected to?
Oh, that's a great question, Jan. Thank you for asking that. Those were my explorations. So those were early pieces where I didn't have a show in mind. I didn't know if I was going to I was like, oh, let me try these oil paints. I've had them forever and I want to get back to them, but I've been kind of like overwhelmed by the notion of mediums and glazing and, and I had and I finally just said, let me just play. So that's how it all began.
Oh, wow. And those are, what aren't they 6 by 8 or 8 by 10 or something?
They're probably 6 by 9-ish. Yeah,
6 by 9-ish.
They're pretty rough. They weren't. I wasn't pre-planning size on those. I'll just say it was like, how can I cut this Reed's BFK down? So this is a poem called "We," which I love. It's from a poem.
I like that a lot.
Yeah. I had someone read the poem, Linda, I already told you this, but I'll say it again for the benefit of the group, that someone came up to me and said, that poem is exactly how my mom raised us. That it just speaks completely to it. It was really nice.
Really nice.
Can you read that one, Linda?
Is that in the book?
I think it is.
Okay, sure. Okay. We watch coyotes breach aspen trees, shoulder first light, glimpse bluebirds, flash of meadowlark, frame first smile, words in our hands, wander among weeds, bunch grass, wind, quench tomatoes, plums, gather eggs, grow children who rise beyond the hills, see sharp-shinned hawks wing dusk out of reach, with wine, bread composed in a daughter's palms, gauzy greens from the garden, we bind the corners of our years to this table.
Nice.
Thank you, Linda. We do have one more question. How did you resolve any disagreements of presentation?
Mhm.
There were none.
Yeah, that's what I would guess.
We had one, this wasn't a disagreement, but Linda, made one edit, and it was so funny because mounting the poems was challenging. It was, because it's white paper, and I would just drop something on it, or a little piece of glue, or it would just be like, oh, I have to redo them. And so I redid a lot. I did them over again, many of them. And then she had one poem that she wanted a 1-word edit. And that's pretty good out of 16 poems, or 17 poems actually, if you include the one that doesn't have a painting with it. So of course that was one that I had mounted perfectly. I love you, Linda. I will change this. I totally get it. Got it. It's fine. So I had it reprinted and I remounted it.
Well done, Meg.
Not too much, not very much to ask. One poem and all that.
Sounds like such a joyful project. It's just lovely to hear you guys talk about it.
Thank you, Sanchin. I appreciate that.
Any other questions, folks? We're just after 8 o'clock. Boy, what a wonderful program. It just was really rich, really layered. I so appreciate this. We're seeing, thank you both for sharing your work in the chat.
You're welcome,
Yeah.
Cassie. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming. Yeah.
Yeah. So go down and see the show and spend some time. The good news is it's up till May 30th. So, go on a Thursday or a Friday, and before all the tourists get there, and be with the work. Yeah.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Take
Good
good
night.
care.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a good
you.
night.
It was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you.